just to kick things off, we're going to end up doing, we've got a roving mic. Jen over here is going to be sharing some questions from the audience. I wanted to first welcome the foreign press. There's about 25 different folks from all over the country working with the State Department. They're here today. Just we're in on that session, and welcome. Thanks for joining us. And then now, I actually just want to kick things off. There's been a lot of questions and concerns and just a lot of stuff going on, around your role. And so I just wanted to ask you, get it out of the way, clear the air. What's your role? No, wait, is it cronut or is it like a donut or a bagel or what's your role?
Drums. Drum roll.
Drum roll. Oh, okay. There we go.
Thank you, drummers.
But seriously.
Last week was definitely an, shall we say, interesting day or week in the media. And I saw these crazy headlines that said something like, I stepping down as from the Downtown Project or whatever. And so I think a lot of it was, well, first of all, what's kind of crazy is like you get one website that says that,
and then everyone just copies it.
And then within like minutes, it's like on
Firestorm.
a million websites, and there's no way to...
Wonderful journalism.
It's like the worst whack-a-mole thing. Like you can't, it's, and so, I wrote up actually a couple things on the Downtown Project website saying this is not true, but because the implication was kind of that so I guess just to take a step back, Downtown Project is kind of this, we use this general term to refer to, it's actually about 300 different businesses and legal entities. So
that's huge.
There's a few that we wholly own. So like Gold Spike that I showed up there, or Container Park, the venue itself. And then there are some where, like Natalie's Eat, where we're 50-50 partners, so we're investors in that. And so it's just kind of crazy. Well, one, I'm definitely don't know the day-to-day operations of Natalie's Eat or really most of the 300 different investments. And so I'm not sure where the miscommunication came from, but my statement was that I'm not involved in the day-to-day operations, and that was exactly true 6 months ago, and somehow it became this headline that I was leaving Downtown Project, which
you're
not
not.
the case. No.
Yeah. Okay, good. That clears the air. We're going to do some Q&A, and I've got other questions if we want to ask them up here too, but I wanted to give you guys in the audience a chance to ask Tony some questions. So Jen, do you want to select, so who's got the first question? Who's going to be the brave first question asker? Of course, on the other side of the room.
Opposite side. And if there's anyone up in the box up there who has questions, Frank, maybe...
Or you could yell it out and we can...
Yeah, we'll repeat it. Yep.
Yeah, maybe you can yell it out.
Yeah.
All right, we'll repeat it if we have to. So what are some of the challenges?
Yeah, I mean, our biggest, because I come from a tech background, and so I think our biggest surprise in the beginning was just using the word community, just because what we found was, so I talked about how Zappos, we want to use the word community, and that doesn't seem to have any issues. But I think because we're involved in real estate on the Downtown Project side, what we found is it came with just people had different expectations about it, and so and there were a lot of cases where people expected us to be either a charity or do things that the government would normally do, and if we didn't, then suddenly we were anti-community. And so that was part of the reason why, from the Downtown Project side, we've really focused more on the words like collision, co-learning, and connectedness as our goal. And I'd say that's probably, call it a learning, or in retrospect would probably just not, yeah, probably in retrospect, probably wouldn't have just started out using that word in the first place. Like, our goal is definitely to help the community, but I think it's it just creates strange expectations, and so for example, if we want to open up a certain restaurant, for example, and if we want to open up a restaurant, we want to invest in whoever we think can do the best job with that restaurant. But if there happens to be someone who, I'm making this up, but let's say someone just wants to open up an Indian restaurant and he happens to live 2 blocks away, has no experience with any of that, if we don't invest in that person because we don't...
Because they're local and... Yeah.
Well, because they have no... Because they're not qualified.
Right.
Then suddenly we found that was
You're the bad guy.
anti-community,
Yeah, okay.
right?
That makes sense.
And so it's just been an interesting challenge because ultimately we want the place to be more diverse, to be more walkable, to be more, to have more collisions, and so if you have a better word than all yours,
Everybody think about it. Tweet it out to the hashtag.
yes.
All right, next.
But I'd say that's probably been the biggest challenge because it just creates a different set of expectations.
So expectation management. Okay. There's some questions in the middle. Let's go here first. You can just shout it out and we'll repeat it.
Yeah, so the question was, with Zappos, there's a strong culture, but with my previous company, Link Exchange, what culture was established? And we just didn't know any better to pay attention to company culture, and not everyone we hired was good for the culture. And so by the time, I remember when it was 5 or 10 of us, we were all friends and super exciting, just like probably most startups at that stage. And then, as we started growing, it just slowly slipped away, and it wasn't any one thing, but it was just one day I woke up and realized I didn't feel like going into the office of my own company, which was a weird feeling.
Right.
So that's really actually what led us to sell the company at the time. And then, it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because if that hadn't happened, then I don't think we would have focused on culture that much at Zappos.
So it's a lesson learned as well.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Yeah. So let's talk. Do you want to just talk about the school effort here as well?
There's been actually different thoughts on that, and there's actually a woman named Casey Kwa who used to work at X Prize and led the design for the Education Literacy X Prize, which I think they actually just launched. And she's here in Vegas, and she and there's also the MacArthur Foundation actually have been thinking about even just flipping it around, instead of thinking of the school as how do you make that more like a city. What if actually the city was the school? And so happy to introduce you to them. They can give a lot more educated answers than I can on that. So
Great. Who's got the next question? So just real quick. So Rama is a company that was funded by the Vegas Tech Fund. They just were acquired by eBay, and they're moving to San Jose. So
yeah.
Catch up to speed.
I mean, I think one of the reasons why I think cities become more innovative and more productive is because it's not. I don't know how many people are in the Vegas area. I think it's roughly 2 million. Mm-hmm. It's not the same 2 million people here, and no one comes in and no one comes out. You have people coming out and people leaving, and it's that constant flow that brings in new, fresh ideas. And I think you need that to happen. And so, so I would expect. Our expectation when we first invest in a startup is that they need to be based out of downtown Vegas. But after that, our philosophy is they should do whatever is best for their company. And so for some, that means that they'll stay. And for others, in an acquisition scenario, if I were eBay, and I would say you should move to our headquarters as well if they were being acquired. So,
right. All right. So a question about your document and what you've shared about the goals.
Right. Yeah, so I guess just to give context for people who may not have read it, very roughly for Downtown Project, we started out in 2012 with a rough 5-year plan, where the first year was about assembling land. We own about 60 acres downtown roughly. And the reason why that was important was to make sure that ensure that there was connectivity from a walking perspective, because if there's one block where the landlord just, for whatever reason, it's an empty dirt lot, it's not lit, it's scary at night, even if there's cool stuff on either side, people just aren't going to walk past the dark, scary sidewalk. So first year was about assembling together land, and it wasn't me personally doing it, we partnered with a company called RGG that specializes in that type of stuff. And then first year and two was about investing in a lot of different entrepreneurs, tech companies, and small businesses. And then now, so we invest in about 100 tech companies, and I forget the exact number of small businesses. And now we're seeing some pretty clear winners where. On the Vegas Tech Fund side of things, our rough math was, okay, about 100 tech companies to kind of help jumpstart the tech ecosystem. So 50 million divided by 100 is 500K. So our max investment, we're just going to do early max investment 500K per tech company. And then we're about, and so we separate that out into $5-10 million funds. And we're towards the end of Fund 3 now, and one of the things we realized that we forgot to take into account was some of these companies are going to do really well and require follow-on investments. Right. So where are they going to get that money from? And so luckily, it turns out that on average, the average investment was probably closer to 300K for those roughly 100 tech companies. So we were able to achieve the 100, but only go through 30 million for the to achieve that 100 instead of our initial projections of 50. Right. And so we decided to actually, what we really should do is focus on the most promising, call it the top 5 or 10% on the tech side and the small business side. Mm-hmm. And so there's a company that we're talking to in one of our existing portfolio companies where now we no longer have that 500K limit, but it's an existing company, and we're looking at investing 5 to 10 million into that, and just because they're doing so amazingly well. Yep. And so that may actually be announced within the next month or so.
We got 7 minutes.
Yes, within the next backstage. Okay, all right. And so there's a number of those where internally we're referring to them as our double down bets, and so. On the tech side, it's a relatively understandable process. It's just their series, series A or B, next round of funding. On the small business side, it's interesting because there's some, like Natalie's Eat, for example, or there's a place called Nacho Daddy, where if you go there, you can actually get a scorpion shot, which is an actual scorpion that in tequila.
Is it a shot?
Yes, so you take the shot, eat the scorpion. You can choose whether to swallow or chew.
They're chewy, yeah, I did that once.
I'm a chewer, but there are other peoples that are swallowers.
They also make nachos, too.
Yes.
That's their name.
But you should try it. Yeah. Get a scorpion shot. And so there's 2 locations now, and we're about to open up 2 more. Oh. And so that's one of those interesting things. I've never really been in the restaurant business, but that's an interesting thing where kind of everyone we hear from the restaurant business is the first 2 to 5 restaurants you open are of the same concept are hard, or it's hard to go from 1 to 2 to 5. Right. But once you figured out 5, then it's super easy to scale. But you scale across different cities.
Makes sense.
And so there's an element of that where like. Nacho Daddy is actually one of our double down bets in the food and beverage category.
Excellent. And there was a question up here. Okay. So it's a big bet. You said it a couple times. How are you sure that this bet's going to be won?
Well, it is and it isn't, I guess. I guess it's... I think part of the reason I say it's a big bet is just because it's alliteration, but it's
clever.
But it's not like, well, I'd say a couple things. One is, it's not like we are coming up with this. wouldn't it be cool if one day people used it's not like Steve Jobs type of big bet where one day there'll be this iPhone that doesn't even exist today and so on.
It's invisible.
And it doesn't exist
Right.
or I mean
Right.
it exists now obviously, but
Right.
back and so all the stuff we're doing is based on research that's been done before, and a lot of that you can read from Triumph of the City, and so it's more about just synthesizing together different pieces of research that's already happening. Like we're not the ones saying, "Oh, I hope that cities will, as they grow, will be more productive or innovative." Like there's a great TED Talk that Jeffrey West does where you can tell him, pick any city in the world and say how many gas stations there are, and he can tell you with pretty close accuracy like how many people live there. And
Wow. So
or
supply
how
and demand
innovative
is driving
well,
it.
no, well, that's where the 15% number actually
Right.
comes from. So as cities get bigger, you actually need fewer gas stations per person and so on. And so it's really just combining all that. And then the other perspective I would give is, yes, Downtown Projects is a single, I don't know what you call it, brand, but it's literally 300 different businesses and legal entities. So what happens at Nacho Daddy is completely independent of what happens at Tech Cocktail.
Right, exactly. And
Unless-
people came out last week and were questioning, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're fine." It's just a matter of how people perceive that brand, and there's a lot of obviously really misinformation out there. So you're okay.
I'm okay.
Okay, good. Okay, good. That's good to hear. Are there other questions? Oh, over here, the phone. Let's talk about education.
Yeah, I think education in the standard sense of schools and so on, I think is a really hard problem involving a lot of politics, unions, and all that stuff. So I don't really have a good answer for education in kind of the standard sense. And so that's actually why we went with the term co-learning, because I think ultimately what matters is the learning and like as human beings, we're evolutionarily designed to want to learn. And so I think there's something probably fundamentally flawed about the model of trying to get kids to learn in an environment that they're usually bored by in a lot of cases. And there's definitely exceptions depending on different schools, but learning should be fun and enjoyable, and kids should, it should be they can't wait to learn. And in the current school system, I think in a lot of places that's just not the case. And so I think I think it's just an area that's waiting to be disrupted. But by definition, you can't predict how the disruption will happen.
Okay, so there were rumors that some crazy rumors, and he's wondering about mistakes. What mistakes have you made and need to be corrected? And he's coming from France. Welcome.
Yeah, no, I mean, Downtown Project is also its own startup, and I think every startup makes a ton of mistakes. At Zappos, we made a lot of mistakes, and I think probably the most important thing for any organization, and especially startup, is the ability to learn and adapt quickly. And so, and that's true at Zappos, and that's true at Downtown Project. So there have been investments that we've made. There's certain small businesses where they've gone out of business, and then there's others that haven't. And if you kind of look at, I guess from our perspective, we think of it more like a venture capitalist model, where venture capitalists in Silicon Valley invest in 10 or 20 companies, and then really one of them is the one that really pays for most of the returns of everything else. And that's just kind of how the math works in the tech world. And then there's ones that are, generate, maybe double the return. And then if I had to guess, it'd be roughly a third go out of business, a third break even, and a third make money. And so that third, across all of that, you maybe make a little bit of money, but then it's that one out of the entire portfolio that actually makes the huge return for that. And so that's kind of the philosophy on the tech side of things. And on the small business side, it's a little different. We would expect that the success rate is higher, but at the same time, a restaurant is not going to is unlikely to go public the way a tech company will.